With free agency well underway, what teams are still in play for Erik Karlsson? Plus, Artemi Kniazev gets traded, and what's left for Mike Grier to do? All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Sharks.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast of your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, contributor at San Jose Hockey Now and Inside the Rink. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen, proudly a part of the Locked On Network, where we cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is follow along wherever you get podcasts, or you can subscribe on YouTube as well. If you haven't subscribed, now's the perfect time. We're closing in on 2,000 subscribers. So great time to get in now, especially with all the draft coverage. We've finished up. We have development camp this week and plenty of stuff to talk about as we head into a new season of Sharks. So let's talk about today. We're going to be talking about a bunch of fun stuff. So we have, of course, Erik Karlsson rumors abound as he has apparently officially requested a trade. So we're going to talk about what teams are still left in the hunt for Karlsson and how much cap space do they have and what would kind of make sense for them. I'm going to talk about Artemi Kniazev getting traded to the Winnipeg Jets, and then look at what some holes Mike Grier still has to try to fill out, and kind of some guys that I think he might be, that I would at least potentially kick the tires on. So let's start with the Karlsson news. So the teams that are kind of still, at least kind of that you're hearing over the weekend, right? The Pittsburgh Penguins, the Carolina Hurricanes, the Seattle Kraken. These are kind of the three names right now. And I know as of Sunday, it felt like the Hurricanes were kind of a little bit of the leader in the clubhouse. So going to look at kind of where these teams are at for cap space and what type of contracts would have to potentially come back for this trade to work. And it sounds like there's going to be a third team involved. However this happens, is going to be a very, very complicated trade for all parties involved. But let's start with the Carolina Hurricanes, who, again, kind of feel like they might be the front runners right now. The Hurricanes, right as of Sunday night, have $2.8 million in cap space right now with a roster size of 22 out of 23. They have their first round pick this year, and they have 2 second round. They have basically all their picks, with the exception of a 2026 third round pick. They're pretty well stacked on all their picks. They, again, only $2 million, so there is going to have to be some fancy finagling here of cap space to get this working going forward. So they don't really have any bad contracts because they're a really smart team, and so it's going to be tough, I think, to get this done, because the big name contracts are Sebastian Aho, which they wouldn't trade, Teravainen, who's very good, maybe Kotkaniemi, who's making $4.8 million for the next bajillion years. But that seems kind of counterintuitive for the Sharks, even though he is only 22, so he's very young. But he is very much overpaid for that contract. And I don't think the Hurricanes owner would do that, especially with the, just for Kotkaniemi. He's, especially with the Montreal thing going, what happened there with the offer sheet, all that fun stuff. So I think that is I doubt that would happen, but that's at least one you could circle where the Sharks would maybe, yes, it's a long contract at under $5 million, but he's only 22. So you're looking at potentially getting a player who would be part of your next core as he's still developing right now. They just signed Michael Bunting. Martin Nikas, who's 24, Jordan Staal, who they just re-signed, Jesper Fast, who they just re-signed, and then a bunch of guys who are making like $1 million. Like you don't just not enough contracts there to kind of make it work, right? You need to figure out how to get somewhere around $7 million worth of contracts for, and looking at the defense, right? Dmitry Orlov, who they just signed, Jacob Slavin. They're not trading Jacob Slavin as one of the best like pure defensemen. Brent Burns, that's not happening. Brett Pesce, maybe he's $4 million. There's been talk of him being on the trade block type of situation. They've also talked that they want to try to work out a longer deal with him. It's that, I guess that would be kind of the foundation right there is Brett Pesce. And then you're gonna have to try to find another contract, or bundle together some other contracts to try to get close to that at least in the $7 million range type of thing, especially if the Sharks eat some and a third team eats some, then maybe you're looking at in the $4 to $5 million range. But that's going to cost, because then Carolina has to pay two teams basically for this contract type of thing. But I would assume, I guess Brett Pesce would be the foundational piece, at least contract wise, who has 1 year left on his $4 million, a little over $4 million contract, right-handed defenseman. And then you're looking at, who knows, maybe you can get a prospect back and you're hoping for some picks type of thing. So, I mean, Carolina is very good at drafting. Their prospect pool has always got interesting players in it. So it'd be interesting, but that's at least the first one, right? The Pittsburgh Penguins, who've been rumored, but it seems like that with the moves that they made this weekend, they could be out now because they're actually $1.5 million over the cap. Just as a reminder, you can be up to 10% over the cap until the start of the season. Then you have to be cap compliant. With them, Jeff Petrie would be kind of the centerpiece, so at least contract-wise coming back for them, because he makes $6.25 million. So basically, if the Penguins, if it's Jeff Petrie, and then you throw in something else to try to make the contracts a little bit closer, then you can kind of look at it and be like, okay, I can kind of figure this out. They do also have 3 goalies on the roster right now between Tristan Jarry, who they just re-signed, Casey DeSmith, who's probably on his way out, and then Ned, who was with the Red Wings, and then also with the Hurricanes, who they just signed a free agency today. So I'd assume Casey DeSmith is on his way out as well. So they do have some picks. They have rounds, and they do have their first and second round pick this year, next year, and the following year. Prospect pool is not good, and that's what happens when you've been a good team for a very long time. You're trading away those prospects, you're trading away those picks. Owen Pickering would be, I guess, where they would start, who is a left-handed defenseman. I guess what I would say is probably their best prospect. And then the Kraken, who still make a ton of sense, have been very, very quiet, have $14 million in cap space, so they can actually just eat the entire Erik Karlsson contract they could just take on the entire Erik Karlsson contract that they want. They do have some RFAs that they need to take care of, including Vince Dunn, who had a good season for them last year. We'll see with them. Again, they don't really have, since they're such a new team, they don't really have any bad contracts. Their highest paid player is Jordan Ellerby at $5.5 million. Scratch that. Philip Grubauer at $5.9 million. They could make it work if they wanted to send contracts back, but they don't really have to, again, because they have a lot of kind of cap space right now this year. And the only kind of big, so they're going to have the Matty Beniers contract they're going to have to work on for next year, because he will be an RFA. So if they want to play the bridge game, but again, they're with their team being so young, they don't have any bad contracts type of situations. And Matty Beniers is kind of the only guy that they're going to have to pay right now, going forward. So and Eli Tolvanen, who's going to be amazing because, of course, he's going to be very amazing. The Sharks have got him. Anyway, so those are the big names right now. I think this Seattle one is, I think, the easiest. If I had to rank them easy-wise, Seattle's the easiest. Carolina is the hardest, and the Penguins, if Jeff Petrie waives his non-movement clause, or there's no trade clause, I don't know how many teams and stuff is on it, but or I guess I could look right now. But if I had to kind of power rank them, I think, again, Seattle's the easiest because they have cap space, they have assets, and it makes the most amount of sense. Even I know it's in the division, et cetera, et cetera. I don't really care if it's in the division, but and then the Penguins is, like I said, I think if Jeff Petrie, who is a 15 team no trade clause, so there's a 50-50 chance that the Sharks are on that trade clause or not. So, and then I think with Carolina, it's the hardest because they don't really have bad contracts, and I don't know. I guess Pesce's going to, and that one's the one where you're probably have to go see a third team bringing it in. So before we continue, we talk about the Kniazev trade and why Mike Grier did it. Do need to take a quick break. Talk to you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. And if you want to take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel, you can get 10 times your first bet amount and bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20. You'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend on everything from the money line to over under. Who do you think is going to hit a first home run? All in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so of course the Sharks, everyone probably woke up, at least I woke up on Sunday morning to the news that Artemi Kniazev had been traded to the Winnipeg Jets for one Leon It's Leon Gawanke. Hold on, I had this. Leon Gawanke. Yes. So it's spelled Gawanke, but it's Gawanke because he's German. So I know people are like, what's up with this? Why did this doesn't make a lot of sense? Especially for Kniazev, who played really well down the stretch last year. But the Sharks' defense pipeline has changed a lot. I know Kniazev was a second-round pick, in the 2019 draft, and he had played in the Barracuda the past couple of seasons, even had an NHL game way, way back in the weird COVID bubble season. But it's very clear for that Mike Grier, there's a lot of defensemen who've kind of jumped him or surpassed him, right? So NHL defensemen, again, if you're trying to stick left, right for them as best you can. So NHL defensemen who are in front of him. Vlasic, who's not going to go anywhere for the next couple of years. Mario Ferraro, not going to go anywhere. You also have Nikolai Kniazev, who I think is a better player than Kniazev. You have Henry Thrun, who's the Sharks' shiny new toy that they traded for and looked very, very, looked pretty good in his limited time last season with the Sharks. Is also becoming BFFs with David Quinn by playing in the World Championships this offseason. You have Jacob McDonald, who's kind of that Swiss Army knife if you need to kind of, I think McDonald will probably play some Barracuda games this year. So you have all those guys on the left side. And then you look at the Barracuda roster, right? So you have Mukhamadullin, who's shiny new toy that you just got in the Timo Meier trade. Nikita Ohotka, who, again, part of the Sharks trade. You have Nick Cicek, part of the Timo Meier trade for Ohotka. Nick Cicek, who's played a fair amount of NHL games last year. Artemi Kniazev, who just signed his ELC this season and will be with the Barracuda. And it just, I think the path for Kniazev to play NHL games is kind of limited, to be honest, right? I think they're going to give Mukhamadullin a chance before Kniazev plays NHL games because I think Mukhamadullin has a higher ceiling. Nick Cicek, I know he was a bit of a mess, but he was still played in the NHL, and I think he can be an NHL defenseman, kind of fitting that role, right? It just felt like there's just a lot of guys who kind of maybe jumped in front, and maybe the Sharks gave up on Kniazev too early, but I don't think there was a pathway for Kniazev to play NHL games here this year, or maybe, the next couple of seasons, just because of the logjam and left-handed defenseman. With Gawanke, he has kind of had a, one, being a right-handed defenseman helps. And two, he's had some really good seasons in the AHL. So last year, he had 45 points in 68 games with the Manitoba Moose, had 20 goals, was tied for first among all AHL defensemen in goals. And then his 45 points were tied for 10th in all AHL defensemen. So he is between Mukhamadullin and Gawanke, you have your kind of two power play special, they can run your power play for you. And then the year before in the AHL, Gawanke had 10 goals, 26 assists, and 36 points in 65 games. He's also played on, he's represented Germany several times, so has yet to make his NHL debut, but it sounds like he could be a guy who's pushing for an NHL job here sooner rather than later, and especially on the right side where I think the path is just much easier, right? Karlsson, who we just talked about in the first segment, if he's gone, that really kind of opens up the pathway for a guy like Gawanke. And again, it's not like, Gawanke has produced in the AHL. I know he's only 24. It's not like he's some old guy who's, been around the block for a while, but he's had two really solid seasons in the AHL. And he's right-handed, which the Sharks just need more right-handed defensemen in their prospect system right now, who are going to play this year. Gawanke, couldn't be a surprise and makes the team or at least makes the Barracuda out of camp. But he's coming off 2 hip injuries where he missed basically all but 4 games last year in the WHL. So I wouldn't be surprised if Gawanke goes back to the WHL to try to have a one more really good season before making the jump to the Barracuda. But again, if Karlsson's traded, right, you're going to have Matt Benning. You have Kyle Burroughs. There's your right-handed defenseman on the Sharks right now. Again, I know McDonald can kind of play both sides. A lot of these guys can play both sides if they need to. But again, I think having a guy who's probably a little bit more NHL ready, and I think just has a clear path for his role going forward. So we shall see what happens there. I liked Kniazev a lot. I thought he had a really strong second half of the season last year for the Barracuda, and I think he's got a bright future in front of him. But you can see with all the new additions in the Sharks pipeline, and Mike Grier is just trying to find his guys right now. And I'm not sure if Kniazev was one of his guys, or at least if Mike Grier liked the way he played type of players. So all the best to him. I think he's going to go kill it I wouldn't be surprised, especially with Winnipeg right now, where how everything's going in Winnipeg, and it sounds like blowing it up type of stuff there. It's if Kniazev gets to play some more NHL games this year. So before we finish up and look at some of the kind of remaining names and what Mike Grier needs to kind of do, or at least what I think Mike Grier might try to do before the end of free agency, do want to take a real quick break. Thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Again, proudly a part of the Locked On Network, where we cover your team every day. If you want to be an everydayer, all you got to do is just come back tomorrow. We're going to start talking about development camp tomorrow, because Tuesday's the first day of development camp. We'll have the actual roster, so we'll talk about the roster, maybe get to know some of the new players on development camp. And then this week, of course, we have Thursday night, we have the prospect scrimmage, so we'll talk about the prospect scrimmage. We'll continue to kind of dig into some of these new players and all the new children that are with the Sharks right now. So again, just make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts, or you can subscribe on YouTube as well. All right, so what does Mike Grier need to do? So with the Sharks right now, they've got about $5.6 million worth of cap space at the moment. They still need to re-sign Martin Kaut, and then, of course, re-sign Leon Gawanke. If Kaut and Gawanke end up playing, I wouldn't be surprised about those guys are in the AHL. Both would need to pass through waivers, but I'm not worried about that, to be honest, between the two of them. So as of right now, the Sharks roster is 11 forwards, 9 defensemen. There's 12 forwards with one Luke Cunnin, who's still in IR, but he'll be ready for the season. So 12 forwards, 9 defensemen, and 2 goalies. I think we're pretty close to seeing it set here. I still think for Mike Grier, I wouldn't be surprised if he looks for some more kind of someone who can play center on the bottom, and the bottom kind of that fourth line center, right? Especially when you traded away Steven Lorentz. Steven Lorentz came in, had a really nice season for the Sharks as their fourth line center. But, I think for the Sharks now, they only really have natural centers. You have Couture, you have Hertl, you have Nico Sturm, and then everybody else is kind of a winger type of player. So unless they want to try maybe like Jacob Peterson as center, but I think I'd rather have him more in that top 6, middle 6 type of role. Or if you want Ryan Carpenter, who they just signed, who's a natural center, I think he could play your fourth line center, but I would rather have him in the Barracuda kind of being that Andrew Agozzino type of player down there. And Thomas Bordeleau, who I think is a center, but I don't know if he's ready for. Thomas Bordeleau needs to be playing in your top 6, basically. He needs to be your basically your second or third line center. I don't think he's ready for that right now, especially with the way he kind of ended last season. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Grier is coupon shopping to try to find a potential center. So some of the guys left who might make sense. My boy Pius Suter, who, again, I don't think he's going to cost very much. He can play center. He's very good defensively responsible. He's probably going to cost, you could probably get him for like one year, like 1.5 million or something like that, right? The Sharks have plenty of cap space. It doesn't matter. It's not like it rolls over or anything like that. Another guy, maybe like a Thomas Nosek, who's, a little bit older. He's 30. He's been playing on winning teams for the Bruins, et cetera, et cetera. But again, I think he can come in and play, just be solid defensively on your bottom line there. So, I think guys like that who are maybe a little bit older, maybe a little undervalued, who are going to kind of come in and hold down the job for a little bit, again, for a year, half a year type of thing. And then, especially a guy like Thomas Nosek, who's a little bit older, but at the trade deadline, you can trade him to a team who's looking for that, a guy who can kind of come in and play on their bottom line type of player. So I think that is where Mike Grier is going to look, again, trying to find someone who can solidify that 4C spot for the Sharks, especially with Nico Sturm playing 3C, Couture is your 2C, and Hertl is your 1C. Trying to find someone who can solidify that and not have to ask some of these young guys like a Tristan Robbins or Thomas Bordeleau to kind of come in and play that position quite yet. or if he wants to let those guys do that too as well. But I think he would rather them play, 15, 20 minutes a night in the AHL than play 7 minutes in the NHL, right? Better for their development to be playing, at least starting the year with the Barracuda, where they're going to be kind of considered to be the guys this year. So that's why I think they try to go out and try to find a cheap veteran option at 4C this year. And then if somebody kind of pops, you can trade him at whoever your 4C is at the deadline. I know people were asking for Nico Sturm last year at the deadline. If somebody wants Nico Sturm, cool type of thing. So, and then I think they, for the Wings, they have a fair amount right now, right? You have, you're going to kind of pencil in Eklund, right? LeBank's still on the team. You have Duclair, you have Barabanov. I think those are your top 4 wings right there. A second line or third line of probably like a Zetterlund and Peterson. And then, you have your Oscar Lindblom and Luke Cunningham, I guess would be kind of your fourth line if I was trying to figure out the lines right now type of situation. So Mike Grier did say they're probably going to be done on the back end. Again, you have 9 defensemen under contract. And we'll see who makes it. If Erik Karlsson gets traded, there changes things a lot right there. But, I think guys like Radim Šimić or Jacob McDonald are probably going to be fighting for their jobs going into training camp. And Henry Thrun is the only one of those guys who's still waivers exempt. So maybe he starts with the Barracuda, but I think the Sharks are really, really high on Thrun. I want to give him every opportunity to try to win a job coming out of camp. So, but yeah, I think 4C is kind of where they're going to be focusing on. Again, it can be a vet min type of contract for them. It's not going to kill them. And if that guy needs to eventually be scratched or whatever, or traded, I don't think it's going to be the end of the world type of thing. So you're just looking for some insulation too, especially if Hertl and Couture only missed 3 games combined last year. That's because Hertl was suspended for 2 and then missed 1 for the birth of his child. I don't think it's feasible to think that those guys are going to go a full season with being healthy again. So having some insulation there, and then, or if you just want to bring a Bordelot type of thing, you can always do that as well. But I think Grier, again, does not want to rush these young guys. So, yeah, and I think it's going to be bargain shopping, try to find some guys who are kind of like, guys who may be a little undervalued right now. Bring those guys in and see if they can resurrect their career. This is that roster churning phase, right? Of trying to find guys who fit what you're trying to build, that you can either turn it into another asset, or maybe they surprise you, a Barabanov style, and they turn out way better than you are, but they're not going to cost you a lot to either acquire them or sign them type of thing. So I think you're going to continue to see that, taking chances on guys who maybe have been undervalued or underutilized elsewhere, and give them an opportunity here in San Jose, where, again, there's a lot of jobs I think that are potentially open for some of these guys going forward. So, So yeah, we'll see what Mike Grier continues to do. So far, I've been pretty happy with his free agency. He said they weren't going to be big spenders, but I think the moves that they made have been smart. The signings that they made have been smart. They haven't really given guys a lot of money and or term. Again, the longest term they've given us 3 years, and that's for Kyle Burroughs at $1.1 million a year. And the most money they've given out is Blackwood for, basically a little under $2.5 million. Like, smart. I think they've all been very smart contracts that you can either get out of easily, or if you need to, they're tradable contracts or as well too. So that's going to be it for me today. Like I said, we'll be back tomorrow to talk about development camp. We should have the roster tomorrow with the first day of development camp, I think on Tuesday or tomorrow, whenever it is the first day of development camp, but we should get the roster. So we'll start talking about that. And then talk about whatever happens with development camp this week and prospect scrimmage. And I think we're going to be looking back at the 2018 draft here this week as well. So again, make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts. You can watch on YouTube as well. You can follow the show on Twitter if it's working, Instagram and Facebook at Locked On Sharks. You can follow me on Twitter, again, if it's working, at My Fry Hole. Until tomorrow. Bye, friends.